The day Gavin laughed at her in the middle of Perk and Bloom was the day Sloane decided she was done apologizing for her life. She had been reaching for the last oat milk on the shelf. Tuesday morning, 7:40, the café, not even officially open yet, when she heard his voice behind her. That voice she used to think was smooth, reassuring, safe. "Sloane? Wow, you're still here." She turned slowly. Gavin stood near the door in a suit that cost more than her espresso machine, a woman beside him whose ring caught the light like something designed specifically to catch light. He was looking around at the exposed brick walls, the handwritten menu boards, the mismatched chairs she'd collected from estate sales over 3 years. He was smiling the way people smile when they're trying not to look horrified. "Still running the little coffee place," he said. Not a question, just a fact he was presenting to the woman beside him, like a photo of roadkill. "Look at this. Isn't that something?" Sloane set down the oat milk. Her hands were steady. She'd gotten good at steady. "Gavin." She nodded once, the way you nod at someone who used to mean something and now means nothing except the vaguely sour feeling of wasted time. "This is Tessa," he said. "My wife." Tessa smiled, bright and practiced. Diamond solitaire, tasteful. Probably 2.5 carats, Sloane thought, and she hated herself a little for noticing. "Congratulations," Sloane said and meant approximately none of it. "We're just grabbing coffee before." Gavin gestured vaguely at the world outside. "Big day. I just closed a deal on the Hargrove building downtown. 42 stories." He let that hang in the air. 42 stories, as if she needed the number of stories. She pulled the door to the walk-in cooler open. She needed the milk, and she needed 1 moment of cold air on her face. "Good for you," she said. She heard him say something to Tessa as the cooler door swung shut behind her. She couldn't make out the words. She didn't need to. She'd heard that tone her whole marriage. That particular combination of amusement and pity wrapped up in something that sounded almost like affection. When she came back out, her daughter was standing at the bottom of the stairs in her pajamas, 5 years old and unhappy about it. "Mama, I can't find Rabbit. Rabbit is on the chair by the window, baby. I put him there last night." "Oh." A pause. "Is he mad at me?" Stuffed animals don't get mad. Sloane crouched down and tugged a small sock up. "Go get him. Then I need you dressed before Aunt Penny gets here." She stood back up. Gavin was watching this exchange with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Something shifting behind his eyes. He'd known she had a daughter. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew, small towns being what they are, but knowing and seeing were apparently different things. "How old?" he asked. 5. She watched him do it and felt nothing except a very specific, very quiet contempt. "She's not. She's mine," Sloane said simply. "That's all that matters." She walked to the espresso machine and started the warm-up sequence. Her hands moved through the familiar ritual, portafilter, grounds, tamp, and she kept her back to them. "What can I get you?" They ordered lattes. She made them perfectly, as she made everything. They left a $4 tip on an $18 order and said it was nice to see her. And then they were gone, Gavin holding the door for Tessa with the easy courtesy of a man who had learned to perform tenderness in public. The cafe was quiet for exactly 40 seconds. Then Penny came through the back with Maisie on her hip, already dressed, Rabbit dangling from one small fist. "Was that who I think it was?" Penny asked. "Don't, I'm just Pen." Penny set Maisie down and said nothing. This was one of the things Sloane loved most about her sister. The woman could swallow entire sentences when necessary. Maisie ran to Sloane and pressed her face into her apron. Sloane stroked her hair and looked out the front window at the empty sidewalk. 42 stories, she thought. Good for him. The building across from Perk and Bloom had been empty for 8 months. Then, one Wednesday in November, it wasn't. 3 moving trucks. Men in black jackets carrying things under tarps. No signage, no announcement, no listing on the city's business registry. Sloane had looked, mildly curious, because the view from her upstairs apartment directly into those second-floor windows was suddenly less calming than it used to be. She first saw him at 6:15 on a Thursday morning. She was unlocking the front door, and he was standing at the window across the street, a phone to his ear, looking at nothing in particular. He was tall. She could tell even from that distance. Dark jacket, still in a way that felt deliberate. He wasn't looking at her, but she felt unreasonably like he might be. She went inside and ground the beans and told herself to stop imagining things. His name, she learned, was Vincent Cade. This information arrived via her customer base, which functioned as a remarkably efficient intelligence network. Marcia from the dry cleaners said he'd bought the entire building outright, cash. Danny from the hardware store said 2 of the men he'd sold supplies to had Eastern European accents and didn't respond to small talk. Old Mr. Patterson said he'd seen a town car idling outside at 2 in the morning with no plates. People with no plates are either FBI or the opposite of FBI, Mr. Patterson said, nodding gravely. That's very helpful, Mr. Patterson, Sloane said, and refilled his coffee. On Friday, the man himself walked into her café. She knew it was him before he spoke. The room changed slightly when he entered it. Something about the way people registered his presence without looking directly at him, the way the barista chatter at the counter, slowed just a half second. He was perhaps 38, with dark eyes that moved around the room and clocked everything in a way that didn't look like paranoia. It looked like habit. He ordered black coffee. He sat at the corner table with his back to the wall. He worked on his phone and did not look up. He left a 20 on a $3 order. He came back the next morning, and the one after that. By the 3rd week, Sloane knew exactly how he took his coffee and the precise way he arranged the table before sitting down. Phone to the right, a small leather notebook to the left, never opened in public. She knew that 2 large men sat outside in a dark SUV when he was inside, and that neither of them ever came in for coffee, which seemed to her like a significant oversight on their part. She did not know anything else about him. This was fine. She had a café to run and a daughter to raise and no particular interest in mysterious men with blacked-out vehicles. She told Penny this on a Sunday night, unprompted. Penny looked up from her wine glass. I didn't say anything. You were about to? I really wasn't? You had the face? What face? The face you make when you're thinking something and waiting for me to bring it up first so you can look innocent. Sloane pointed. That face. Penny smiled into her wine. He sounds interesting. He sounds like someone else's problem. Sloane, when was the last time you had dinner with someone who wasn't me or a 5-year-old? Last March. That was 14 months ago. I'm aware. Penny was quiet for a moment. Then, Maisie asked me today if mamas can have boyfriends. The sentence landed somewhere soft. Sloane turned her wine glass in her hands. What did you tell her? I told her mamas can have whatever makes them happy. She's 5. She probably forgot about it by lunch. She drew a picture of you and a tall person and labeled it Mama and Friend. It's on the refrigerator. The tall person has a lightning bolt on their shirt for reasons she declined to explain. Sloane laughed despite herself. The tension in her chest loosened just slightly, like a knot that had been pulled from one side. He's probably married, she said. Probably, Penny agreed. He wasn't. She found this out not through her intelligence network, but through Vincent himself, on a Thursday morning when Maisie was sitting at the end of the counter doing worksheets because the sitter had canceled and the cafe wasn't busy yet. He came in, ordered his coffee, and then stopped halfway to his table because Maisie had looked up from her worksheet and said, with the complete social confidence of a child who has been loved without reservation her entire life, "Hi. Do you know about wolves?" He looked at her. Something passed across his face. Not discomfort, Sloane noted. Something quieter than that. Some things, he said. I'm doing a project. My teacher says wolves have families just like people, except they don't fight about who does the dishes. That's probably accurate. Do you have a family? Sloane looked up from the steam wand. Maisie, it's a question, Mama. It's a personal question. Vincent Cade looked at Sloane for exactly 1 second, steady, unreadable, and then back at Maisie. Not much of one, he said. Not anymore. Maisie accepted this with the equanimity of someone who has not yet learned to treat grief as a topic requiring delicate navigation. That's sad, she said. You can be in ours if you want. We have room. Mama says there's always room if someone needs it. The silence that followed was approximately 3 seconds long and felt, to Sloane, like falling. That's very kind, Vincent said. He sat at his corner table. He opened his notebook for the first time and wrote something in it. He did not look at his phone. When he left, he paused at the counter. "Your daughter is remarkable," he said. Sloane was wiping down the machine. Her hands were doing the steady thing again, the practice thing. "I know," she said. "She gets that from herself." He almost smiled. It barely made it to his mouth, but it was there. "Have dinner with me Friday." She looked up. He was watching her with that same still, measuring attention he used on rooms, on situations, on things he was trying to understand. "I don't know anything about you," she said. "You know I drink black coffee and I'm a decent listener, and you have men who sit outside in an SUV. They're for my protection, not anyone else's." A pause. "I'm aware of how that sounds. And yet you're telling me anyway. I find it's better to be honest about the inconvenient things early." His voice was even, matter of fact. Like he'd made this calculation and arrived at it as the logical conclusion. You can say no. She thought about Gavin and his 42 stories. She thought about 14 months and a drawing on a refrigerator with a tall person in a lightning bolt shirt. 6:30, she said. "I have a daughter who goes to bed at 8, so I need to be home by 8. 6:30, he agreed and left. Penny, when informed, said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "He asked you himself?" "Just walked up and asked?" "Yes. Not through an app, not through a mutual friend, just face to face?" "That is what I said." Penny pressed both hands to her heart like she was experiencing mild cardiac symptoms. "Sloane, that's a man." "You're very strange," Sloane told her. The restaurant he chose was quiet and good, the kind of place that doesn't need to be loud about being good. He was already there when she arrived, standing to greet her, and she noticed, because she noticed everything. That was part of how she'd survived. That the table was positioned so that he had the wall behind him and she had the room in front of her, a clear sightline in every direction. And she wasn't sure if that was protective or automatic or both. They talked for 2 hours. She learned he'd grown up in Chicago, he'd built a company in logistics that she only partially understood the scope of. He had a sister in Portland he called every Sunday. He had read, inexplicably, every Patrick O'Brian novel. And he took the kind of care with his words that suggested he'd spent a long time around people who used theirs carelessly. He learned. She'd gone to nursing school, then pivoted, then built the café from a loan and 3 maxed credit cards. She was raising Maisie without support from Maisie's father, who had made clear he didn't want the role. She had strong opinions about sourdough and only moderate opinions about most films, and she realized mid-sentence, not nervous. She was comfortable. The realization was disorienting enough that she stopped talking for a second. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. I just..." She shook her head. "I'm usually more guarded than this. I noticed, and I think you let your guard down when you trust your own judgment," he said. "Not because someone persuaded you to." She thought about that for a long moment. That's either very perceptive or a very smooth thing to say, could be both. She laughed. A real one, the kind that surprised her. He looked at her with that almost smile again, the one that barely reached his mouth, and she thought, "Oh, this is the part where it gets complicated." She was right. It got complicated when Gavin came back. Not for her. That was the first thing she needed to be clear about, to herself, sitting at her kitchen table at 10 at night after Maisie was asleep. Gavin did not get complicated on her behalf. He got complicated because he had a habit, she now understood, of coming back to things he'd dismissed in order to reassess their value once someone else had indicated interest. He came into the café on a Tuesday and sat at the counter. Not a corner table, not a wall seat, front and center, and watched her the way he used to when they were 26 and everything was still possible, and she hadn't yet learned what he looked like when he was being strategic. "I heard you've been seeing someone," he said. She made his coffee without asking what he wanted, because she remembered, and because she was the kind of person who couldn't stop being good at things, even when those things were no longer useful to her. "That's not really your business, Gavin. Cedar Falls is a small town. It is." She set the cup down. "How's Tessa?" A small pause. "We're figuring some things out." She heard the whole sentence under that sentence. She'd had 5 years of practice translating him. What he meant was, things are not good, and I am looking at my old life with nostalgia because that is easier than addressing my current one. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, and meant approximately 30% of it. He leaned forward. Sloane, we had something real. We did, she said. And then you told me that a cafe in a small town was a dream for people who'd given up on bigger ones, and you moved to Columbus and met Tessa. She wiped down the counter. Steady. I don't have any ill will toward you, Gavin. I genuinely don't. But I'm not a place you get to come back to when other things don't work out. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee and said, Who is he? Someone I'm seeing? Is it serious? I'm not discussing this with you. He left. She went in the back and stood for 30 seconds with her eyes closed, not because she was upset. She wasn't, not really. But because she needed to confirm, somewhere quiet, that she knew exactly what she wanted, and it was not a single thing behind her. She called Vincent. Hey, she said when he picked up. Hey. His voice was even, attentive, the way he always answered, like he'd been waiting but wasn't going to say so. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She exhaled. My ex came by, the one with the building. Yes, she'd told him about the 42 stories. He'd said nothing complimentary about 42 stories, which she'd appreciated deeply. He's having problems with his marriage, and apparently I'm adjacent to that in his mind. Do you want me to come by? No. She smiled despite herself. I don't need you to come by. I just wanted to hear your voice. A pause. When he spoke, something in his voice had shifted, careful, the way he was careful with things he didn't want to break. All right, he said. Talk to me. She leaned against the wall in the back of her cafe, surrounded by bags of beans and the low hum of the refrigerator, and talked to him for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. Maisie's Wolf Project, a customer who'd cried over a latte for reasons they hadn't shared, a dream she'd had about her grandmother's kitchen. He listened. He asked questions that were small and specific, the kind of questions that told you someone was actually listening and not just waiting for their turn. When she said she should probably sleep, he said, The ex came by because you're the kind of person who makes people realize what they gave up. He'll figure out that's his problem and not yours. She was quiet for a moment. You're very confident about that. I'm confident about most things, he said. This one in particular. She found out what Vincent Cade actually did on a Sunday in January when Maisie was at her mother's, and Penny came to the cafe with her laptop and a face that meant she'd been on the internet. He's not in logistics, Penny said. He is, partially, Sloane. Penny turned the laptop around. The article was from a financial publication, 6 months old. There was a photograph of Vincent in a context that was not a small-town cafe, a conference room, a group of suited men, and a caption that described him as the principal architect of the Cade Group, a private security and asset management firm with holdings across 14 countries. There was another description, lower in the article. She read it twice. She closed the laptop. Okay, I need to talk to him. Sloane. Pen. I'm not panicking. I'm gathering information. She stood up. I'll call you later. She drove to the building across the street. She had never done this before. She'd always waited for him to come to her and pressed the intercom. One of his men answered. She gave her name. The door opened. Inside was not what she expected, which was nothing specific, only something cold and corporate. It was an open space, functional but not theatrical, with large windows and the specific absence of unnecessary things. Vincent came downstairs in a dark sweater and no jacket, which was the most undressed she had ever seen him, and that small fact made everything feel more real and less like a situation. You know, she said, that you found the article. Yes. He'd seen her pull up on the building cameras. She understood that now. I was going to tell you. When? Soon. He met her eyes. I should have already. She sat down on the edge of a chair and looked at her hands. The article called you a fixer. For people with problems that are significant enough to require a certain kind of solution. That's a reasonable summary, and the men in the SUVV are necessary. Vincent. She looked up. Tell me what I'm actually dealing with here. Not the version that sounds manageable. The real version. He sat down across from her. He put his hands together, loosely, and she noticed again the way he occupied space. Entirely, without aggression, just present in a way that most people weren't. He told her. Not everything, she understood. There were things he would never fully tell her, things built into the structure of the life he'd built. But he told her the shape of it, the protection work, the clients, the reasons for the lack of license plates, and the men who didn't come in for coffee. The things he'd done that were legal, and the things that existed in a space that the law had not fully gotten around to addressing. When he finished, the room was very quiet. "Why Cedar Falls?" she asked. A pause. "My sister lives 40 minutes from here. I got tired. Of certain things." He paused again. "I saw your cafe on the first morning, the way you unlocked the door." Another pause, longer. "I came in for coffee," she thought about this, "and you just started coming back." "Yes, because of the coffee." He didn't answer that, which was its own answer. She sat with it for a moment, the weight of it. The way it changed some things and didn't change others. The way Maisie had drawn a tall person with a lightning bolt shirt and said, "There's always room if someone needs it." The way she herself had said she was not a place people came back to when other things didn't work out, and understood, sitting in this room with its absence of unnecessary things, that she had not been talking about herself in general. She had been talking about what she deserved, which was different. "I'm not going to pretend this is simple," she said. "I know, Maisie." "I know," he said again, and something in his voice landed softly. "She comes first. She should come first. That doesn't change what I want, but it means I'll take whatever pace you decide." She looked at him for a long time. He looked back at her with the same steady attention she'd been watching from across a street for 4 months, the same quality of stillness that she'd first read as mystery, and now understood as something more like patience. "I need some time," she said. "All right." She stood up. At the door, she stopped. "You let her ask you if you had a family," she said, "and you answered her honestly. Yes, that mattered to me." She went back to her cafe and sat upstairs in her apartment until Maisie came home in the afternoon, a construction paper wolf tucked under her arm. "Mrs. Dalton says my wolf family is the best in the class," Maisie announced, dropping the wolf on the table with great ceremony. "That's because you worked very hard on it. I gave the mama wolf a coffee cup." Maisie pointed. "See? Because she owns a coffee shop. And the papa wolf has a lightning bolt." Sloane looked at the wolf family on the table, crayon and glue stick and construction paper. "Come here," she said. Maisie climbed into her lap. Sloane held her and looked out the window at the building across the street and thought about what it meant to choose things instead of just surviving them. To stand in your own life and say this and not that, with the full weight of your own judgment behind it. Not because someone had convinced you. Not because something had fallen apart or come together in a way that left you without options. Just because you knew what you wanted and you'd earned the right to go toward it. She called Vincent that evening. Maisie was in the bath, narrating an elaborate scenario involving a rubber duck's moral failings. "I'm not asking for easy," she said when he picked up. "A beat. I know, and I'm not changing who I am or how I run things. I wouldn't want you to. But," she exhaled, "but I'd like to see where this goes, with full information. No more waiting for the right moment." "No more waiting," he agreed. She could hear what she now understood to be his version of a smile, not in his words but in the particular quality of his silence after them, like space he was making room in. "Maisie's wolf family has a papa with a lightning bolt," she said. A pause. Then, "Did she explain the lightning bolt?" She declined. "That's probably for the best," he said, and she laughed, and the evening stretched out ahead of her like something she had not expected and was learning to stop being surprised by, a life that was hers, exactly hers, still being built.